For as the light of the morning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, and covereth the whole earth, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Therefore sanctify yourselves, that your minds become single to God, and the days will come that you shall see him. For he will unveil his face unto you, and it shall be in his own time, and in his own way, and according to his own will. This is unveiling Jesus Christ.
Hello and welcome to another podcast on Unveiling Jesus Christ. I'm John Cassanet and I'm your host and discussion leader, but I have noticed that the discussion only seems to be going in one direction. Nevertheless, congratulations are in order because after 6 podcasts covering Revelation chapter 7, we finally made it through the first verse and we're ready to move on in this podcast to Revelation chapter 7, verse 2, but only part of it. We're going to cover the first 9 words found in Revelation chapter 7, verse 2. So I'll try to keep my commentary in check. I mean, that's a lot of words for one podcast, let's face it. Today's discussion will cover the angel from the east known as Elias. So if you want the nutshell version of this podcast, you can check out section 70 in my book. So let's start out with those 9 words in Revelation 7:2, which are, quote, "And I saw another angel ascending from the east." By way of recap, after John saw the 4 angels of life and death in Revelation 7:1, we're then told that he saw another powerful angel ascending from the east, and that's what we're going to talk about in this verse. East, as a direction, of course, is figurative. It's the direction of the rising sun, denoted by the Hebrew word Mizrah, or rising. The Hebrews faced the rising sun in telling directions, and east was the front. In Matthew 2 and 9, the Greek expression for east means rising, Anatole. And in these verses, for example, it states, "For we saw his star in the east," that is, in its rising. It may or may not be a cardinal direction as described in connection with the birth of the Savior. In fact, the wise men were east of Judea, and if they were looking at the star that was over the manger, they'd actually see the star in their western sky. The east is used in the scriptures as a figurative expression, are a description of Christ's appearance at the second coming. Joseph Fielding McConkie explains the symbolism further, saying, quote, "East, as the directions of the dawn and the rising sun, it becomes a symbol of light, truth, and Christ. The orientation of the east gate of the temple at Jerusalem was such that on the days of the spring and fall equinoxes, the first rays of the rising sun, heralding the advent of the glory of God, could penetrate into the Holy of Holies. Joseph Smith said that the coming of the Son of Man will be as the light of the morning coming out of the east." Close quote. Using this symbolism, we see that the ascending angel in Revelation 7:2 is like the rising sun. Its influence grows as the light of the day grows. Think of how this is related to rising the number of ceilings in temple work. The number of ceilings is increasing exponentially, much like the rising sun as it gets brighter and brighter until it is at noonday. The name Elias is both a name and a title for this angel. John doesn't give us the name in Revelation 7:2, but Joseph Smith does in Doctrine and Covenants, section 77:9, where he said, quote, "What are we to understand by the angel ascending from the east?" Revelation 7th chapter and 2nd verse. Answer: we are to understand that the angel ascending from the east is he to whom is given the seal of the living God over the 12 tribes of Israel. Wherefore he crieth unto the 4 angels having the everlasting gospel, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of God in their foreheads. And if you will receive it, this is Elias, which was to come to gather together the tribes of Israel, and restore all things." Close quote. The name and title Elias is scripturally defined in Doctrine and Covenants section 27:6, which states, quote, "And also with Elias, to whom I have committed the keys of bringing to pass the restoration of all things, spoken by the mouth of all the holy prophets since the world began, concerning the last days." Close quote. Robert Millet kind of elaborated on this scriptural definition when he said, quote, "Elias is a code name, a title given to anyone whose assignment from God is of a preparatory nature. It is used of numerous people in various ages: Abraham's day, Jesus' day, and the last days. The role of this latter-day Elias, as defined in chapter 7 of Revelation, is to preach the gospel, restore priesthood, gather the elect, and seal them up before the earth is hurt. He is a forerunner, a preparer of the way." Close quote. The name title Elias is used in different contexts and with different functions. It's often considered a composite angel who represents functions and the ministry of many angels. Robert Millet also explains this, saying, quote, "Since the title is applied to many individuals in the various revelations, Elias must be a composite personage. The expression must be understood to be a name and a title for those whose mission it was to commit keys and powers to men in this final dispensation. Thus, Elias in this revelation, meaning Doctrine and Covenants 77:11, identifies each of the many key holders who came to Joseph Smith to transmit keys." Close quote. It might be more clear to say that this is a generic angel. The specific identity is not important to the meaning of the message. In other words, it doesn't matter if Elias is a Gabriel, Noah, or the Elias who came to the Kirtland Temple. In this context, Elias is applied more as a title than a specific name. Joseph Fielding Smith said, quote, "As previously stated," that is in section 77:8, "the restoration of the gospel did not come through just one messenger, but there are several who came and bestowed their keys of authority and power. The name Elias is a title. This we have been taught by the prophet Joseph Smith. It is not possible, therefore, since so many ancient prophets had a hand in the restoration, that in speaking of the Elias who was to come and restore all things, do we not have a composite picture of several Eliases rather than one single individual? The angel with the seal directs the four angels holding the destiny of the world in their hands not to hurt the earth until the servants of the Lord have been sealed. This could not be accomplished until the gospel was restored and proclaimed to the nations of the earth." Close quote. Now, Doctrine and Covenants, section 77:9 tells us that this angel from the east is Elias, if you will receive it. The same language is found in Matthew 11, verses 10, 13, and 15, saying, quote, "For this is he of whom it is written, Behold, I will send my messenger before thy face, which shall prepare the way before thee. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John the Baptist. And if ye will receive it, this is Elias, which was for to come. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear." Close quote. Albert Barnes explains the style of speaking in these verses when he said, quote, "This is a mode of speaking implying that the doctrine which Jesus was about to state was different from the Jews' common views, that he was about to state something which varied from the common expectation and which therefore they might be disposed to reject." Close quote. Thus this phrase, "if you will receive it," concerns a truth not easily apprehended or easily accepted. People have their prejudices, their preconceived notions, we call them their sentiments, their biases, whatever it might be. It kind of reminds me of jury selection on a trial that I had been selected to serve as a juror. Now, I didn't ever actually become a juror on the case for reasons I'm about to explain, but I was called in for the jury panel for a drunk driving case. And the attorneys during voir dire are attempting to try and figure out whether the prospective juror have any of these biases, sentiments, preconceived notions, prejudices, the very kind of thing that we're just talking about in terms of this concept, if you will receive it. So as I'm sitting there, and I do get into the box where I'm being asked certain questions, and the lawyers ask, okay, do any of you have any law enforcement and legal experience, right? And so, of course, I raised my hand. I was a judge advocate in the Marine Corps prosecuting drug cases. And of course, I was a civil attorney litigating civil lawsuits. And so, yes, I raised my hand and say, yeah, I have both. Okay. And then they ask, okay, do any of you have any moral opposition to drinking? Well, I raised my hand again. Yeah, I'm morally opposed to drinking in any form because of this little thing we call the word of wisdom. And so, okay, they take it. I mean, it's like I'm the only guy in the whole jury talking. Everybody else just sitting there, and I'm raising my hand on practically every question. Next question. Do you think you can be fair and unbiased? They asked me specifically because I had all these apparent prejudices and bias. And I told them specifically, listen, I can follow the instructions, but I will see the evidence, hear the evidence, and interpret the evidence through the lenses of my experience. You just have to understand that. And so eventually they get around to asking me the question, I think it was the defense attorney, if you were defending this case, would you want you on my jury? I basically said, you know what? You want me to be completely honest, I'd have to kick me off. And of course they did. The judge let me go. It just, me sitting on a drunk driving case, I'm not your best juror for the defense, obviously. But at any rate, so that's the kind of notion that we're talking about with these prejudices and biases. When we hear things, we automatically see things through the lenses of our experience. And that's what Jesus was talking about in terms of this concept, if you will receive it. If we can get you over these biases and these prejudices that you already have, then maybe you can come to understand the concept of Elias and his role in the gospel of Jesus Christ. Bruce R. McConkie explains how this name title has been used, saying, quote, many angelic ministrants have been sent from the courts of glory to confer keys and powers, to commit their dispensations and glories again to men on earth. At least the following have come: Moroni, John the Baptist, Peter, James, and John, Moses, Elijah, Elias, Gabriel, Raphael, and Michael. Since it is apparent that no one messenger has carried the whole burden of the restoration, but rather that each has come with a specific endowment from on high, it becomes clear that Elias is a composite personage. The expression must be understood to be a name and a title for those whose mission it was to commit keys and powers to men in this final dispensation. Close quote. Joseph Fielding Smith similarly said, quote, the Elias who is to restore all things is a composite Elias. In other words, the restoration was not made by one personage, but many. And in speaking of Elias coming to restore all things, the Lord was using that title in a plural meaning, having in mind all the prophets who came to restore the fullness of the gospel. This would include John the Baptist, Peter, James, and John, and every ancient prophet who restored the keys from the days of Adam down. Close quote. The best known preparer and forerunner that we are aware of, or who is the epitome of preparers and forerunners, would be John the Baptist. His role in the meridian of time and in this dispensation, because he appeared to Joseph and Oliver on May 15, 1829, and was the first to restore priesthood authority in this last dispensation before the millennium. Elder John Widsoe explained the role of Elias as a preparer when he said, quote, now it has been made clear from a later revelation that the mission of John the Baptist was to prepare them, the Jews and others, for the coming of the Lord. It is concluded from this and other passages that the mission and spirit of the prophet Elias are to do the necessary preparatory work whenever the gospel dispensation or period is about to be opened. Close quote. Joseph Smith would be considered both a preparer and a restorer. Thus, he, in a sense, is an Elias. He meets the definition of Elias both as a name and as a title. The prophet Joseph was the prophet of the restoration, but he was also a preparer for Christ's second coming. So definitionally, an Elias is one who goes before one greater than himself to prepare the way for the greater who is to follow. Jesus Christ is the ultimate restorer of his own gospel. So we read in Joseph Smith translation, John chapter 1, verses 26 through 28, which state, quote, "And they asked him, and said unto him, Why baptizest thou then, if thou be not the Christ, nor Elias, who was to restore all things, neither that prophet? John answered them, saying, I baptize with water, but there standeth one among you, whom ye know not, he it is of whom I bear record. He is that prophet, even Elias, who, coming after me, is preferred before me, whose shoes latchet I am not worthy to unloose, or whose place I am not able to fill. For he shall baptize not only with water, but with fire, and with the Holy Ghost." Close quote. A good overview and summary of this was also given by Byron Merrill when he said, quote, "Thus the name Elias in the New Testament may refer to someone who has the calling of a forerunner, preparer, or restorer to the actual Old Testament person named Elias, or to Elijah." The Joseph Smith translation clarifies that of the 15 references to Elias in the New Testament, 4 of them, namely Matthew 11, 17, Mark 9, and John 1, are referring to persons with the calling of Elias. These references are all to preparers or restorers and not to the person Elijah himself. John the Baptist is specifically designated as an Elias in all 4 scriptures. Now, several angels in the latter days have exercised the keys of Elias, meaning someone who comes as a preparer and or a restorer. For example, Moses, Elias, and Elijah came to the Kirtland Temple on April 3rd of 1836, and Franklin D. Richards summarized their visitations when he said, quote, "In the temple at Kirtland, Moses, Elias, and Elijah appeared and conferred upon him," meaning Joseph Smith, "the keys of the gathering of Israel of the gospel of Abraham, and of the turning of the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the children to the fathers." Close quote. The second angel who appeared at the Kirtland Temple in 1836 is actually called Elias by name. This name is associated with Noah. Joseph Fielding Smith said in General Conference that, quote, "Elias came and restored the gospel of Abraham." Who was Elias? That question is frequently asked. Well, Elias was Noah, who came and restored his keys. Close quote. Richard Cowan adds some details to this, saying, Gabriel was the messenger who appeared to Zacharias and who was identified in a latter-day revelation as Elias. Thus Noah is Gabriel, who is Elias. Concluded President Smith, this same Elias who held the keys of the dispensation of Abraham and who came to the prophet Joseph Smith in 1836 and restored those keys. Close quote. Noah was, of course, the presiding patriarch after the flood. As such, he held the keys of the restoration of all things and the keys of the patriarchal order of the priesthood. These keys passed to his second son, Shem, whose name was probably changed to Melchizedek. John Widsoe cautiously came to this conclusion, saying, quote, "There is an old Hebrew tradition that Melchizedek was none other than Shem, the son of Noah. As far as the age of Shem is concerned, that is possible. Shem lived 502 years after the flood, and Abraham was born 292 years after the flood. Abraham therefore must have known Shem. However, doubt is cast upon this claim by the revealed statement that Melchizedek received it, meaning the priesthood, through the lineage of his fathers, even till Noah. Close quote. David Galbraith elaborates on this same possibility, saying, quote, other references equate Melchizedek with Shem possibly being his name and Melchizedek his title. The book of Jasher, 1611, notes that Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, the same was Shem, went out with his men to meet Abram and his people with bread and wine, and they remained together in the valley of Melech, which in Hebrew means the King's Valley. John Taylor wrote in Ancient Ruins in the Times and Seasons that, quote, and with the superior knowledge of men like Noah, Shem, who was Melchizedek, and Abraham, the father of the faithful, three contemporaries holding the keys of the highest order of the priesthood. Close quote. From Shem, or Melchizedek, the keys passed to Abraham, with whom the Lord established the Abrahamic covenant, which today is called the patriarchal order of the priesthood. This is entered into only through the sealing ordinance of the temple. Robert Millet explained this, saying, quote, the messenger Elias, who appeared in 1836, whose specific identity is not mentioned in the Revelation, committed the dispensation of the gospel of Abraham, saying that in us and our seed all generations after us should be blessed. That is, in modern times, Elias restored the Abrahamic covenant, the patriarchal order. The keys associated with that order of the Melchizedek priesthood we know as the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. Close quote. Elijah was the third angel who appeared at the Kirtland Temple, who also qualifies as an Elias, not by name, in 1836. He restored the sealing power. The sealing power seals husbands and wives for eternity in the new and everlasting covenant. Now, the main difference between the keys of Elias and the keys of Elijah, which sound a lot alike, are this. Elias concerns the dispensation of Abraham, that is, the patriarchal order. He has the keys associated with celestial marriage. Elijah's sealing power, on the other hand, extends the marriage covenant beyond the grave. Joseph Fielding Smith adds this detail to that bottom line explanation, saying, quote, Elijah restored to this church and, if they would receive it, to the world, the keys of the sealing power. And that sealing power puts the stamp of approval upon every ordinance that is done in this church, and more particularly those that are performed in the temples of the Lord. Through that restoration, each of you, my brethren, has the privilege of going into this house or one of the other temples to have your wife sealed to you for time and for all eternity, and your children sealed to you also, or better, to have them born under that covenant. Close quote. Elijah essentially restored the sealing power so that the 144,000 servants identified in Revelation 7 could be sealed in their foreheads. This was to be done in fulfillment of John's vision of the sixth seal that we read about in Revelation 7:3, which says, quote, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Close quote. Moses, Elias, and Elijah were just three of the many angels with a part in the restoration of all things during the sixth seal. Therefore, we say in Revelation 7:2 that John saw Elias as a composite image representing all the composite Eliases in John's visions, which are not to be confused with the spirit or doctrine of Elias. The spirit or doctrine of Elias pertains to the Aaronic or preparatory priesthood. Bruce R. McConkie explains this distinction, saying, quote, Joseph Smith taught that a preparatory work, one that lays a foundation for a greater work, one that goes before to prepare the way for a greater which is to come, is a work performed by the spirit of Elias. This principle is called the doctrine of Elias. The prophet explained that the spirit and doctrine of Elias pertain to the Aaronic priesthood only. He used himself as an example, saying that he worked by the spirit of Elias from the time he received the Aaronic priesthood, which is a preparatory priesthood, until the Melchizedek priesthood was restored. Close quote. Another explanation of this can be found in the Encyclopedia of Mormonism, which states, quote, "The spirit of Elias is a LDS concept that refers to the preparatory power that initiates gospel restoration following periods of apostasy." The prophet Joseph Smith explained, "The spirit of Elias is to prepare the way for a greater revelation of God, which is the priesthood of Elias, or the priesthood unto which Aaron was ordained. And when God sends a man into the world to prepare for a greater work, holding the keys of the power of Elias, it was called the doctrine of Elias, even from the early ages of the world. We find the apostles endowed with greater power than John the Baptist. Their office was more under the spirit and power of Elijah than Elias." Close quote. The composite image of Elias ascending from the east like the rising sun symbolizes the manner in which the restoration of the gospel has occurred. Since the first vision in 1820, the light of the restored gospel has grown like the rising sun. That is the pattern for many signs of the times that precede the second coming. The rays of gospel light emerged from the darkness of the great apostasy, and they continue to grow brighter and to extend further in all the world as the sixth seal continues and ultimately will end. When the angel from the east is fully ascended, as the sun at noonday, then the four restoring and destroying angels of the sixth seal will be fully unleashed. In other words, the four winds of destruction will blow with their full strength, as described in Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 through 17. And these I have described in my prior podcasts as the great earthquake, the dark sun, the red moon, the falling stars, and the signs and wonders in heaven. By these signs all people may know that the sixth seal has come to an end, and by these signs all people may know that the full gospel light is found in all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people. And by these signs they will also know that the sealings of the sixth seal have been accomplished. Joseph Smith describes the fast approach of this event, saying, quote, "The saints have not too much time to save and redeem their dead, and gather together their living relatives, that they may be saved also, before the earth will be smitten and consumption decreed falls upon the world. I would advise all the saints to go with their might and gather together all their living relatives to this place, that they may be sealed and saved, that they may be prepared against the day that the destroying angel goes forth." Close quote. These words of the prophet, spoken in 1844 in Nauvoo, are good advice for us today. Keep in mind that when he said there's not too much time to save and redeem the dead, he reminds us that this work of sealing is not just the living. We have to do the sealing work for our kindred dead as well. That's part of what must be accomplished during the latter part of the sixth seal. So we are now 180 years closer to the end of the sixth seal than when the prophet said, quoting him again, "The saints have not too much time to save and redeem their dead and gather together their living relatives, that they may be saved." I guess what I'm saying is you don't have time to be sitting around listening to me. You need to be at the temple. Okay, you can stick around long enough to hear the end of my podcast as I give thanks for listening, watching, liking, subscribing, and for Jenna for all her help. And by the way, if I'm not here for another podcast, you'll know where to find me.